The Atlanta sun was already heavy and thick by 8 in the morning, casting long golden shadows across the manicured lawn of the Buckhead estate I had bought in cash 3 years ago. I stood on the wraparound porch, a cup of black coffee warming my hands, just listening to the distant hum of the city. 32 years old. If you had told me a decade ago, when I was sweeping floors at a neighborhood salon and eating ramen noodles for dinner, that I would be standing here as the CEO of Maya's Crown, a multi-million-dollar hair care empire, I would have laughed in your face. I knew what grinding looked like. I knew the ache of working 100-hour weeks, the sting of investors slamming doors in my face, and the exhaustion that settled so deep into your bones you forgot what it felt like to be rested. But I had made it. And more importantly, I had brought my family with me. My husband, Jamal, was my supposed rock, a smooth-talking, impeccably dressed man who stepped in as the chief financial officer of my company when the numbers got too big for me to handle alone. And then there was Tasha, my older sister. She had practically raised me when our mother passed, and now she lived rent-free in my guest house, acting as my personal manager and closest confidant. I had given them the world because I believed that when you win, your blood wins with you. I thought I was living the dream. I didn't realize I was just decorating a cage they were preparing to lock me inside. The illusion began to shatter on a completely unremarkable Tuesday. I had taken a rare morning off to run some personal errands. My first stop was the private wealth management branch in Midtown. I wanted to authorize a wire transfer of $50,000 to a local community center to fund a summer program for at-risk girls. It was my annual tradition, a quiet way to pay my blessings forward. The bank lobby was silent, all polished marble and frosted glass. I sat across from Arthur, a senior account manager who had handled my private portfolios since my first major product launch. We exchanged the usual pleasantries about the weather and my latest business expansion before I slid the authorization form across his massive mahogany desk. Arthur adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Then he stopped. The steady clicking ceased. I watched his polite, professional smile tighten into something that looked uncomfortably close to pity. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie as if the air conditioning had suddenly stopped working. "Maya," he started, his voice dropping an octave, taking on a hushed, delicate tone that sent a cold prickle of adrenaline down my spine. "I'm looking at the primary private reserve account now. I'm afraid, well, the system won't allow this transfer to go through. There are insufficient funds to cover the $50,000. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. You don't survive the cutthroat beauty industry by letting people see you sweat. I kept my posture perfectly straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "Excuse me, Arthur? That account had over $300,000 in it as of last month's statement. It's a dedicated reserve. It shouldn't have been touched." Arthur leaned closer, his eyes darting toward the glass door of his office before looking back at his screen. "Not anymore. Over the past 3 weeks, there have been a series of massive withdrawals. A wire for $120,000 last Tuesday. Another for $80,000 the week prior. The air in the room suddenly felt dangerously thin. "Authorized by whom?" I asked, though my gut was already twisting with the answer. "By your husband, Jamal," Arthur replied gently, "and co-signed by your sister, Tasha, acting as your power of attorney. They submitted paperwork stating you were stepping back from financial oversight due to severe exhaustion and burnout. Jamal cited the new stress relief asset management protocol you all established." I stared at him. The words echoed in my head, loud and chaotic. But on the outside, I was a statue. Power of attorney? Severe exhaustion? Jamal and Tasha had been hovering over me lately, constantly telling me how tired I looked. Tasha kept bringing me calming teas at night, insisting I was overworking myself to the point of a breakdown. Jamal kept urging me to let him handle the heavy lifting so I could just focus on being creative. I thought it was love. I thought it was protection. It wasn't. It was a calculated, methodical financial coup. I see, I said. My voice was eerily calm, completely devoid of the panic Arthur was clearly expecting. There must be a clerical misunderstanding on Jamal's end regarding which accounts to draw from for our new investments. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Arthur. Please print the last 90 days of transaction history for this account and put a hard freeze on all remaining assets across my personal portfolio. No money moves without my physical presence in this building. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Maya. 10 minutes later, I walked out of the bank and into the sweltering heat of the parking lot. I climbed into the driver's seat of my Mercedes, closed the door, and let the heavy silence of the car swallow me whole. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Tears are a luxury for victims, and I refused to be a victim in the life I had built with my own 2 hands. My husband and my sister thought they were dealing with a fragile, burnt-out 32-year-old girl who was too tired to notice she was being robbed blind. They thought they could gaslight me out of my own empire. They were about to learn a very hard, very expensive lesson. I didn't just wear the crown, I forged it. And heaven help anyone who tried to take it from me. I didn't drive back to my Buckhead estate. Going back there meant stepping into a crime scene where the criminals were still pouring the coffee and asking about my day. Instead, I merged onto I-85 South and headed straight for the heart of downtown Atlanta. I needed a surgeon, but not the medical kind. I needed someone who could dissect a lie and bleed it dry. I needed Renee. Renee and I had met when my business was just a folding table at local hair expos, and she was a junior associate drowning in student loans. Today, she was a senior partner at one of the most ruthless corporate law firms in Georgia. She was my fiercest friend, and more importantly, she was a shark. When I walked into her corner office overlooking the city skyline, she took one look at my face, closed her laptop, and locked her door. I dropped the bank printouts on her sleek glass desk. They're bleeding me, Renee. Jamal and Tasha. They forged a stress relief asset management protocol and moved $200,000 in 3 weeks. Renee didn't gasp. She didn't offer me a tissue. She simply put on her reading glasses, her perfectly manicured finger tracing the lines of the unauthorized wire transfers. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break your heart, it rewires your entire DNA. An LLC called Apex Holdings, Renee murmured, her eyes narrowing at the destination account. Give me 48 hours, Maya. I have a private investigator who can find a needle in a digital haystack. You go home. You act like the tired, stressed-out CEO they think you are. Do not let them see your eyes shift. Can you do that? I built a $30 million company in an industry that wanted me to fail, I sadly said, my voice dead quiet. I can play the part. And play the part I did. When I pulled my Mercedes into the driveway that evening, the house looked exactly like the sanctuary I had designed it to be. The exterior lights cast a warm, inviting glow over the landscaping. Jamal's pristine Range Rover, bought with my end-of-year bonus, was parked in the garage. I walked through the heavy oak double doors, intentionally letting my shoulders slump. I kicked off my heels and rubbed my temples, adopting the posture of a woman crumbling under the weight of her own success. Tasha was in the custom marble kitchen, stirring something in a mug. She wore a silk robe I had bought her for her birthday, looking every bit the pampered older sister. When she saw me, her face immediately contorted into a mask of exaggerated, sickly sweet concern. "Oh, baby girl," Tasha cooed, rushing over to take my designer bag from my hands. "You look absolutely exhausted. Your skin is completely washed out. Have you been forgetting to eat again?" "Just a long day, T," I whispered, forcing a tired sigh. Jamal walked in from the living room, a crystal glass of bourbon in his hand. My bourbon. He wrapped his free arm around my waist, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "I told you, Maya, you're pushing yourself too hard. The company can run on autopilot for a while. That's what I'm here for. Let me carry the financial stress." It took everything in my power, every ounce of discipline I possessed, not to shatter his bourbon glass against the marble island. His touch, which used to make me feel safe, now made my skin crawl. "Here," Tasha said, pressing a warm mug into my hands. "I brewed you that special chamomile and valerian root blend. You've been so paranoid and forgetful lately, Maya. Yesterday you couldn't even remember where you put the quarterly projections. You need to drink this and sleep. Let us handle things." Paranoid and forgetful. There it was. The seeds of the narrative she was meticulously planting. I looked down at the tea. Who knew what she was actually putting in it? I nodded weakly, took the mug and headed upstairs, pouring the entire contents down the master bathroom sink the second the door clicked shut. 2 days later, I was back in Renee's office. The air was entirely different this time. It was sharp, lethal. Renee had 3 thick manila folders laid out on her desk. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like a general briefing her commander before a war. "Twist number 1, Renee said, opening the first folder. She slid a glossy photograph across the glass. It was Jamal. He was walking out of a luxury high-rise condo in Midtown, his arm wrapped tightly around the waist of a stunning 20-something Instagram model. They were laughing, carrying shopping bags from Dior and Chanel. "Her name is Chloe," Renee stated flatly. 22 years old. Apex Holdings is the shell company Jamal set up to lease her a $6,000 a month penthouse and fund her lifestyle. "Your husband isn't making bad investments, Maya. He's financing his second life." I stared at the photo. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, but the tears never came. Anger was rapidly incinerating any grief I might have felt. "And Tasha?" I asked softly. "Is she covering for him?" Renee let out a dark, humorless laugh. "Oh, Maya, it's so much worse than that." Twist number 2. She opened the second folder and handed me a stack of legally bound documents. "Tasha isn't just covering for him. She's the architect. My investigator pulled these from a private psychiatrist's office that Tasha has been paying under the table." I read the bold heading on the first page, and the floor seemed to drop out from underneath me. "Petition for medical conservatorship. Tasha is building a paper trail to prove you are suffering from severe early-onset psychological burnout and memory loss," Renee explained, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The tea she's making you? The constant reminders that you're forgetting things? It's classic gaslighting. She wants a judge to declare you legally incompetent so she can seize full control of Maya's crown and your entire personal estate. Jamal is just her pawn, stealing the cash while she prepares to steal the throne." I sat back in my chair, the sheer audacity of it taking my breath away. My own sister, the woman whose college tuition I paid, the woman I moved into my home so she wouldn't have to struggle. She didn't just want my money. She wanted to erase me. "Maya?" Renee asked gently, watching my silence. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the picture of my cheating husband. I looked at the conservatorship papers my sister had drafted. The 32-year-old girl who just wanted to take care of her family died right then and there in that leather chair. I looked up at Renee, and for the first time in days, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I want to let them think they're winning," I said quietly. "Lock down the real assets. Set up the legal traps. We are going to let them dig their own graves, and then I am going to bury them alive." There is a specific kind of clarity that comes only after your heart has been completely shattered. You stop crying. You stop asking why. You just look at the pieces on the board and realize that the only way out of the game is to flip the table. I spent the next 48 hours turning my life into a legal fortress. I sat in Renee's office, the Atlanta skyline sprawling behind her glass windows like a kingdom I had conquered and refused to surrender. "I want it all locked down," I instructed, sliding the master deeds to my Buckhead estate, my commercial properties, and the controlling shares of Maya's crown across her desk. "Make it bulletproof." Renee didn't hesitate. By Thursday afternoon, we had established a fully funded, irrevocable trust. For those who don't understand high-level asset protection, an irrevocable trust is the financial equivalent of a nuclear bunker. Once your assets go inside, they cannot be touched, altered, or withdrawn without the explicit documented consent of the trustee, which was Renee, and the grantor, me. Tasha's forged power of attorney, instantly nullified. Jamal's stress relief asset management protocol, worthless paper, and the sole beneficiary of this multi-million-dollar trust? It wasn't my backstabbing sister. It wasn't my cheating husband. It was the newly formed Maya's Crown Empowerment Fund, an endowment designed to provide seed money and mentorship for young Black female entrepreneurs in Georgia. Girls who were grinding just like I was at 22. Girls who actually knew the value of loyalty. The vault was sealed tight. Not a single cent could be drained to buy another designer bag for Jamal's 22-year-old mistress. But securing the money was only half the battle. I had to secure my freedom. Tasha has an appointment set for you tomorrow with a Dr. Vance, Renee told me, reviewing a dossier her investigator had compiled. He operates out of a high-end wellness clinic in Sandy Springs. He caters to the wealthy, prescribing rest cures and signing off on conservatorships for families who want to quietly sideline their relatives. He's expensive, and he's morally flexible. I nodded slowly, absorbing the information. If Tasha wants a broken, exhausted 32-year-old woman teetering on the edge of a nervous breakdown, that is exactly what I will give her. But before I stepped foot in Dr. Vance's clinic, Renee drove me to Emory University Hospital. I didn't see a wellness guru. I underwent a grueling 5-hour comprehensive cognitive, neurological, and psychiatric evaluation by a panel of 3 board-certified specialists. They tested my memory, my stress responses, and my executive functioning. Their official legally binding conclusion? My psychological health and cognitive functions were in the top 99th percentile. I wasn't burning out. I was sharper, more resilient, and more lucid than most people twice my age. I walked out of Emory with a certified affidavit of absolute mental competency, signed, sealed, and tucked safely into Renee's briefcase. The next morning, it was time to put on the performance of a lifetime. Tasha drove me to Dr. Vance's clinic in my own Mercedes. She held my hand at the waiting room, stroking my knuckles with a sickeningly sweet display of sisterly affection. "Just tell him how overwhelmed you feel, baby girl," she whispered, her eyes wide with fake sympathy. "Tell him about the memory lapses. It's okay to admit you need help." When we sat in Vance's plush, overly perfumed office, I gave them an Oscar-worthy show. I wore no makeup. I dressed in a faded, oversized cashmere sweater. I kept my gaze fixed on my lap, letting my hands tremble just a fraction. When Vance asked me questions about my company's recent quarterly earnings, numbers I knew in my sleep, I intentionally stumbled. I rubbed my temples. I let a single perfect tear roll down my cheek. I can't keep track of it all anymore, doctor," I whispered, my voice incredibly fragile. "I feel like I'm losing my grip. I keep forgetting where I put things. I just want to sleep." Dr. Vance exchanged a knowing, conspiratorial look with Tasha. "Maya, you are suffering from severe executive burnout, bordering on early onset cognitive dissociation," he declared, using big words to mask a blatant lie. "I'm going to draft a medical affidavit recommending an immediate transfer of your legal and financial decision-making rights to your sister. It's for your own protection." Tasha let out a heavy, dramatic sigh of relief, squeezing my shoulder. "Thank you, doctor. We just want her safe." I kept my head bowed, hiding the cold, predatory smile that was fighting to break across my face. They thought they had me. They thought that piece of paper was their golden ticket to my empire. They had no idea they were holding a lit match while standing in a room full of gasoline. The traps were set. The evidence was gathered. All the documents were secured in 3 thick, black leather portfolios sitting in the trunk of Renee's car, waiting for my signal. Friday night, I lay in the massive king-sized bed next to Jamal. I listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing. I thought about the vows we took, the empire we supposedly built together, and the little girl in Buckhead he was spending my money on. I thought about Tasha, sleeping in the guest house I paid for, dreaming of the day she could officially declare me insane. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby, because Sunday dinner was coming, and the menu was going to be absolute devastation. Sunday evening arrived with the thick, suffocating humidity that only an Atlanta summer can produce, but inside my Buckhead estate, the central air was humming, crisp and cool. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen. I didn't have my private chef come in. I wanted to do this with my own hands. I cooked the kind of southern meal that my late mother used to make when we had something to celebrate. Smothered chicken, candied yams with the edges perfectly caramelized, collard greens cooked down with smoked turkey, and a peach cobbler bubbling on the stove. At exactly 6 o'clock, Tasha and Jamal sat down at my custom 12-foot mahogany dining table. Tasha was wearing a silk blouse she'd undoubtedly charged to my corporate account. Jamal was wearing one of his tailored Tom Ford suits, checking his Rolex. He was probably calculating how quickly he could swallow my food and rush across town to his 22-year-old mistress. We bowed our heads. Jamal, with the breathtaking audacity only a true sociopath possesses, led the grace. Lord, we thank you for this bounty. We ask that you lay your healing hands on Maya's mind and grant her peace in this season of confusion. I didn't say amen. I just picked up my fork. We were 15 minutes into the meal when Tasha made her move. She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope, sliding it across the polished wood so it rested right next to my water glass. "Baby girl," Tasha said, her voice dripping with that rehearsed, sickly sweet sympathy. Jamal and I were talking. After what Dr. Vance said on Friday about your cognitive burnout, we think it's best if we formalize your medical leave. It's just a standard conservatorship proxy and some banking authorizations, just so I can handle the heavy lifting while you rest. Jamal had his expensive silver pen already uncapped, holding it out to me across the table with an encouraging paternal smile. "Just sign right there at the bottom, Maya. We've got you." I looked at the silver pen. I looked at the fraudulent documents. And then, very slowly, I picked up my linen napkin, wiped the corners of my mouth, and laid it perfectly square next to my plate. When I looked up, the exhausted, trembling 32-year-old woman they had been manipulating all month was gone. I straightened my spine, rolling my shoulders back. The air in the dining room instantly shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I don't think I'll be signing that, Tasha," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the exact same tone I used in the boardroom when a supplier tried to shortchange my company. Cold, final, absolute. Jamal's reassuring smile faltered. His hand, still holding the pen, hovered awkwardly in the air. "Now, Maya, let's not make this difficult. The doctor explicitly said, Dr. Vance," I cut him off smoothly, "is a high-priced hack who is currently the subject of an anonymous tip to the state medical board for accepting bribes to falsify psychiatric evaluations. I know, because Renee filed the report for me yesterday." Silence slammed into the dining room like a physical weight. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioner. Tasha's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. "Maya, what are you talking about? You're confused again. The stress is making you paranoid." "Do not insult my intelligence by gaslighting me at my own dining table," I snapped, the razor edge in my voice finally breaking through. I reached down to the empty chair beside me, picked up the heavy black leather portfolio I had hidden there, and dropped it onto the mahogany table with a loud, violent thud. I flipped open the cover and slid a highlighted bank ledger toward Jamal. $120,000 wired on Tuesday, I read aloud, my eyes locked on his, watching the color rapidly drain from his face. $80,000 the week prior, funneled straight into an LLC called Apex Holdings, an LLC that strangely enough has never filed a tax return. You're not my chief financial officer, Jamal. You're an embezzler. Jamal started to physically shake. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and realized he forgot his parachute. Maya, listen. The market shifted. I was restructuring our liquid assets to protect— You don't have the vocabulary to explain federal wire fraud to me, Jamal, I said, my voice dead calm. I flipped to the second section of the portfolio and slid an 8x10 glossy photograph across the table. It was the picture Renee's investigator took. Jamal and Chloe walking out of the Midtown high-rise, dripping in designer bags. $6,000 a month for rent in Midtown, I continued, watching Jamal's jaw drop open in pure terror. Plus the Chanel, plus the Dior. I really hope Chloe is worth it, Jamal, because she is about to become the most expensive mistake of your miserable life. Tasha gasped. It was a sharp, ugly sound. She snatched the photograph off the table, her eyes wide with genuine, unadulterated shock. She looked at the picture, then looked at Jamal. The realization hit her like a freight train. You're sleeping with a 20-something-year-old Instagram model on my sister's dime? Tasha shrieked, slamming her hands down on the table, rattling the fine china. You told me that cash was going into the offshore reserve for the conservatorship. And there it was, the golden confession, screamed out loud right in my dining room. I leaned back in my chair, picked up my crystal glass of iced water, and took a slow, refreshing sip. I watched the two people who had conspired to destroy my life realize that the house of cards hadn't just collapsed. It had caught fire, the doors were locked, and I was holding the only extinguisher. For a full 2 minutes, my custom dining room sounded like a chaotic episode of a trashy daytime talk show. Tasha was screaming at Jamal, slapping his shoulder, calling him every vile name in the dictionary. Jamal was stuttering, desperately trying to cover up his infidelity while simultaneously realizing he had just confessed to wire fraud in front of the very CEO he had stolen from. I sat there, using my sterling silver knife to cut a perfect piece of smothered chicken, chewing slowly while the two people I loved most tore each other to shreds. When they finally ran out of breath, panting and glaring at each other from across the table, I placed my silverware down. Are you quite finished? I asked, dabbing my mouth with my napkin. Because the peach cobbler is getting cold and we still have business to conclude. Tasha whipped her head toward me. The mask of the loving, concerned older sister was completely obliterated. Her face was flushed dark, her eyes hard, resentful, and venomous. You think you're so damn smart, Maya, she spat, abandoning the sweet act entirely. So what if Jamal is a cheating dog? That money was going to be mine anyway. I practically raised you when Mom died. I supported you when you were nothing. I am your only family. Your only heir. You're 32 years old and working yourself into an early grave. That empire belongs to me just as much as it belongs to you. I looked at the sister I had idolized, the woman whose bills I had paid for the last 5 years, and I felt a profound, chilling emptiness. No anger, no tears, just absolute pity. You're right, Tasha, I said softly, my voice echoing in the quiet room. You were my only heir. I opened the third and final black leather portfolio. I slid a heavy, legal-bound document across the table. It bore the gold foil seal of the state of Georgia. As of Thursday afternoon, every commercial property, the Buckhead estate, my liquid assets, and my controlling shares in Maya's crown were transferred into an irrevocable trust, I explained, watching her eyes frantically scan the dense legal jargon she couldn't possibly comprehend. Renee is the trustee, and the sole beneficiary, the Maya's Crown Empowerment Fund, a scholarship and grant foundation for young black female entrepreneurs in Atlanta. Girls who actually know the value of grinding for $1. Tasha stopped breathing. Her chest froze. You gave it all away? She whispered, the crushing reality violently pulling the rug out from under her. You left me nothing? I am your sister. I left you exactly what you earned, Tasha, I replied coldly. Not a single dime. Pure, unadulterated panic set in. Tasha grabbed the fraudulent medical proxy she had brought to dinner, waving it in the air like a weapon. "You can't do this! I still have your power of attorney. Dr. Vance is going to sign the affidavit tomorrow saying you are mentally incompetent, and a judge will overturn this stupid trust." "I already told you, Vance is under state investigation," I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto hers with lethal intensity. "And as for my mental fitness, while you were busy setting up your little offshore account to steal my life's work, Renee drove me to Emory University Hospital. A panel of 3 board-certified neurospecialists gave me a 5-hour psychiatric and cognitive evaluation. I tapped the Emory medical seal on the bottom page of my folder. I scored in the top 99th percentile for executive function. I am sharper than you. I am smarter than your embezzling pawn of a husband. And my new legal directives explicitly, permanently revoked any and all power of attorney you ever held." Tasha sank back into her chair as if her spine had been snapped. The mastermind had just been outplayed on every single board. She was completely disarmed. But I wasn't finished. I turned my attention to the man sitting to my left. Jamal was sweating straight through his Tom Ford suit, eyeing the front door like he was calculating his odds of outrunning a bullet. "Now, Jamal," I said, folding my hands together on the table, "you have a choice to make, and you have exactly 60 seconds to make it. You wired $120,000 of my corporate funds across state lines to a shell company. That is federal wire fraud. I have the bank records, and I have the signature you forged." He swallowed so hard I could hear it. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Maya, baby, please. Option 1, I continued, steamrolling right over his plea. "I call Detective Williams at the APD right now. I hand over these folders, and you go to federal prison. The IRS seizes that shell company, and your little 20-something girlfriend in Midtown will be looking for a new sugar daddy by midnight." Jamal shook his head frantically, tears welling in his eyes. "What's option 2? Maya, please, I'll do anything. Don't do this." "Option 2. I leaned in close, letting him see the absolute zero in my eyes. "You leave this house tonight with nothing but the clothes on your back. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, you march into Renee's office and you sign the divorce papers. You ask for no alimony, you forfeit all marital assets, and you resign as CFO. You do that, and I give you exactly 48 hours to liquidate whatever you bought and return every single cent you stole. Fail to meet that deadline, and I send the FBI to your doorstep." The survival instinct of a coward is a pathetic thing to witness. Jamal didn't even look at Tasha. He didn't try to defend himself. "I'll sign," he choked out, standing up so fast his heavy dining chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. "I'll return the money. I'll sign the papers." "Good," I said smoothly, not breaking eye contact. "Now get out of my house." He practically tripped over his own expensive leather shoes, rushing out the door. The heavy oak front door slammed shut behind him, shaking the walls, leaving me alone in the dining room with the sister who had tried to bury me alive. The heavy oak front door clicked shut behind Jamal, leaving a silence in the dining room so absolute it felt like a physical weight pressing down on the mahogany table. Tasha sat frozen in her chair. The manicured hands that had forged my signature and drafted my mental competency hearing were trembling uncontrollably. She looked around the massive, beautifully decorated room, staring at the fine china she thought she'd inherit, the crystal chandelier she thought she'd sell, and finally, at the younger sister she thought she had broken. "Maya," she whispered. Her voice cracked, stripping away the last remaining layers of her arrogance. All that was left was the desperate, pathetic whine of a bully who had finally been backed into a corner she couldn't lie her way out of. "Please, I'm your sister. You can't just throw me out on the street. Where am I supposed to go?" I reached across the table and picked up my crystal glass of iced water. I took a slow sip, letting the cold ground me. "You are going to go figure out how to live in the real world, Tasha. I said calmly, setting the glass down. Without my credit cards paying your tabs. Without my guest house keeping a roof over your head. Without the name Maya's Crown opening doors for you in this city. Tasha started to cry. Real ugly tears this time, streaking her expensive mascara down her cheeks. I made a mistake. I know I did. But family forgives, baby girl. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I'll make it right. I swear. Family doesn't hire a corrupt doctor to lock their sister in a psychiatric ward so they can steal her life's work, I replied, my voice completely devoid of anger. I was simply stating a fact. That's not a mistake, Tasha. That's a calculated predatory strategy, and unfortunately for you, you underestimated your prey. I pointed to the edge of the polished mahogany table. The keys to the guest house. The keys to the Mercedes SUV I lease for you. Put them on the table, pack a single bag of your clothes, and let yourself out. She tried to argue. She opened her mouth to play the I raised you card one last time, but she saw the look in my eyes. The well of endless sisterly forgiveness had run completely, permanently dry. With shaking hands, Tasha unclipped her designer keychain, laid the heavy metal ring on the table, and walked out of the dining room. She didn't look back. I didn't cry when I heard the front door close a second time. I didn't collapse into a heap on the floor. At 32 years old, I had built a $30 million empire from a single salon chair, and I was entirely done sacrificing my peace of mind for someone else's greed. By 9 o'clock that evening, the emergency locksmith I'd scheduled that afternoon was already drilling out the dead bolts, replacing every lock on the estate, including the guest house. By 10 o'clock, I had packed the remaining smothered chicken into Tupperware, wiped down the marble counters, and poured myself a glass of expensive red wine. The weeks that followed moved with the inexorable, unstoppable momentum of justice. Jamal kept his word, terrified of a federal prison sentence. He liquidated the shell company, sold the Porsche, and returned every stolen cent to my corporate accounts. He signed the divorce papers quietly, walking away with absolutely nothing. Tasha was forced to move into a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city, working a mid-level retail job to support herself because no one in the Atlanta beauty industry would hire her after I made a few quiet phone calls. She tried to reach out a few times. I let every single call go to voicemail. Some folks in our extended family whispered. They said I was too harsh. They said a sister should never turn her back on her own blood, no matter the betrayal. Let them whisper. They didn't see the forged conservatorship documents. They didn't see the psychological trap designed to strip away my freedom and my sanity. One bright Tuesday morning, a month after the dinner, I stood on the balcony of my master suite. The Georgia sun was warm, the sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the estate was perfectly quiet. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. I looked at the house I owned, the empire I had fiercely protected, and the future I had secured for a whole new generation of young women through my newly funded foundation. My husband and my sister thought my generosity was a symptom of weakness. They thought my youth made me an easy mark. But they forgot one simple, undeniable truth. The woman who builds the castle always knows exactly where the trapdoors are. I took a sip of my coffee, smiled at the morning sun, and walked back inside my home, entirely unbothered and completely free.